Action figure reboots. Sponsored by Pearson Art.
Hello, and welcome back. Today we're looking at a Mego Superman, released in 1972 as part of the original four lineup, which included Batman, Robin, and Aquaman. These figures were a huge hit for Mego, and Superman was no exception. As you can see from this picture, Mego produced various different scales and sizes for this character. Way too many to list. But a pretty impressive output for such a short period of time. And then, in December of 1978, the godfather of all superhero films was released, Superman the movie. I saw it on Sunday in its opening weekend, and I loved it then, and I still love it. I think it's aged beautifully, and I still believe a man could fly. It was also a huge hit, so because of that, I expected an influx of merchandising, like there was with Star Wars and even Planet of the Apes. But it was kind of slim pickings. There was a lot of things out there as far as a comic book version of Superman, but not too much of the film version. And then Mego released something that was kind of along the movie lines. It was a series of four 12-inch figures, which consisted of Superman, General Zod, Lex Luthor, and Jor-El. When I first saw these, I really didn't know what to make of them. I was older by then, so I really didn't have any skin in the game. But being a Superman fan and the big movie just being released, I wanted to check these out. The first thing that stuck out about these figures was that they were made in 12-inch scale. Mego made most of their characters in 12-inch scale. Not all of them, but they're heavy hitters like Spidey, Batman and Robin, Hulk, Wonder Woman, and of course Superman. But I think by the late 1970s, especially with the introduction of Kenner Star Wars, the 12-inch figures were starting to become a little passe. But these were new head sculpts, and that's where it got even trickier. The packaging and the costume looked like the comic version, but the head sculpts looked like the actors that played them in the movie. I noticed that when I saw the Jor-El figure. He had the suit that he wore in the comic books, but he had white hair, just like Marlon Brando did in the movie. And I knew, even back then, that was no coincidence, especially when you factored in General Zod being part of the lineup. He wasn't exactly a household name. I only knew him from the movie, and he wasn't in it very long. I read years later about these figures, and what the theory was that Mego didn't want to pay the licensing fee for the Superman movie since they already had it through the comic books. And I really don't blame them, and I don't know how true that story is. But as a kid who knew nothing about licensing, to me it seemed kind of cheesy. I remember thinking at the time, why didn't they just make the 8-inch figure look more like the movie version? And when I say movie version, I mean costume. The head itself, I think, would have been fine to use. Now, that might sound a little unorthodox today, but up till then, there were only two other actors that played Superman in live action. There was Kirk Alyn in the movie serials, and George Reeves on the television show. So, out of the three of them, I think he looked the most like Christopher Reeve. I don't really think it's that much of a stretch. I think it looks a lot more like Christopher Reeve than this version. This version, I don't know, there's something about it. It's the hair and the eyebrows. When I look at this, I get more of a Marlon Brando vibe, and I'm not entirely convinced that they didn't mix up the Jor-El and Superman head in production. On a side note, I will say that the Lex Luthor head that they made was stellar. You could see Gene Hackman all over this sculpt. Overall, I don't think it was Mego's best work, this line, I mean, but this head really stands out, above and beyond. Rest in peace. So I guess I could say for the same reason I don't like the 12-inch figure, I like the 8-inch figure. It's the hair. As far as the likeness itself, it's close. You have to understand, back in the 70s, it wasn't like what it is today. Today, collectors pay a premium for figures, and for that, they expect these things to look dead on. And who could blame them? But back then, these were just disposable toys. Don't get me wrong, Mego nailed plenty of head sculpts, but not all of them. For example, back then, they also made a Starsky and Hutch line. For those of you who don't know, that was a detective series back in the 70s. The series itself was a little gritty for an action figure line, but it was what it was. So, how do we know that this was Starsky and Hutch? Because the packaging told us it was. In all honesty, I think anybody would be hard pressed to know who this character was. And I'm using this as an example because it was a live show and not a cartoon that you could play around with. So I would classify a sculpt like this as a soft likeness. It's there, you just gotta find it. Theoretically, if Mego wanted to do something like this, there's very little they would have had to do. If this was the head they decided to go with, they could have kept just about everything else. They could have kept the same cape, same suit, same belt, and the same boots, especially the boots. If you look at the boots on this Christopher Reeve costume, you can see that they come up to his knees, just like Mego's. These were just the standard Mego boots that all the DC characters had. Now, I don't think they're great boots for a comic book version of the character, which is what this is supposed to be. But for something like this, I think they're perfect. So they could have kept everything, except the emblem. That would need to be changed. But that was just a sticker, so that would have been a simple fix. So I thought it would be cool to put my theory to the test and see what might have been. But I'm going to take it a few steps further. In addition to changing out the emblem, I'm going to change out the cape and the belt as well. But I am going to keep the boots. So with that being said, let's begin. For the head, I'm going to go with this Mego 50th anniversary Superman. I like the idea of using this reproduction head. I can't believe it's been 50 years. So there's a little bit of old lang syne there. Also, it's a brand new head, so it doesn't need to be painted or anything. It's right out of the box. I did have to modify the neck plug because it was made for a different body. And speaking of which, for the body, I'm going to go with this. This is the Mego Type 1 standard body. I think this body has a better build for this kind of a Superman. For the suit, I'm going to go with this CTVT reproduction. It's a Bizarro suit, but that doesn't really matter because the emblem's going to cover it. Unfortunately, the emblems on these suits don't come off. They're ironed on or stamped on or something like that. But I really like the color of this blue, so I just went with this. For the emblem, I'm going to go with this one. I got this from Laser Mego some years back. I'll put a link in the description. This was cut out with the CNC machine, and it's kind of cool because it's actually two layers of vinyl, so there's some depth to it. Around the same time that I picked up this emblem, I also picked up this belt. I saw something like this on a Superman figure that was released some years back, and I thought it was an interesting approach, so I wanted to try something like that. For the boots, I'm going to go with these reproductions, also by CTVT. I'll leave a link in the description. To finish off the Type 1 body, I'm going to use these hands from the Type 2 body. I think these look a lot better than the hands that come with the Type 1. And lastly, for the cape, I have this red t-shirt material. Now, I don't have any set patterns or anything, so I'm kind of just going to wing it, so wish me luck. Okay, we have all the parts. Let's put it together and see what we got. All right, I'm digging this. I like the way this came out. I could see something like this being put out back in the day. Definitely. And I really think these boots work perfect for this version. I can't see them working any better for any other one. The emblem and the belt look good too. I'm glad I went with that belt design. That has a really good fit. Against all odds, I think the cape actually came out pretty good. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just kind of going along with it until I found the right shape that I liked. It's not sewn in or anything, but on the same token, it's not going anywhere either. It's in there pretty good. But what I really like is how it all comes together. The combination of the suit and the head. I think you could have sold this back in the day as a Superman movie figure. I really do. Growing up, George Reeves was always my Superman. He was on every day after school. But after this film was released, Christopher Reeve became everybody's Superman. And that's a good thing. So I guess that about wraps it up for this episode. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, share, comment. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, always remember and never forget, think outside the box.